We all know Apple always kills off the Pro models the second a new generation hits the shelves. However, Apple just started dropping refurbished 16 Pro Max units, which means you can snag one for under $1,000 right now. So you get full warranty and the option to stack AppleCare on top, making them basically brand new phones without the steep price tag. Let's revisit the design, display, battery, performance, and cameras of the iPhone 16 Pro Max to see if it is actually the smarter buy compared to the total attention seeker, the 17 Pro Max. Hey, I'm Olive, your host here at Versus.com, and remember, you can join our community by hitting the join button right below for exclusive videos and perks. And here's a shout out to Nevzat, Blake, G, and Rishab for becoming part of the Ultra Members gang. Apple drastically changed the look of their flagship with the 17 Pro Max, sporting a pretty questionable Hershey's bar camera setup and a rounded unibody that definitely steals some cues from the Apple Watch Ultra. The 16 Pro Max looks way more minimalistic and refined by comparison. The 17 Pro Max now comes with a unibody aluminum build with a matte finish, plus it carries a ceramic glass window at the back. The 16 Pro Max comes with a matte titanium frame and a frosted glass back. However, Apple doesn't communicate what specific kind of glass is protecting the 16. Interestingly, the 17 Pro Max is heavier than the 16, even though it uses the more fragile aluminum. Both of these come with an IP68 rating, so they can both handle a synchronized swimming session for 30 minutes at a depth of 6 meters. So as always, let's check in with the team and see who likes which design best.
The 16 Pro Max.
The 16 Pro Max.
The 16 Pro Max.
The 16 Pro Max.
The 17 Pro Max. What about you?
I'm going for the 16 Pro Max. So we have big changes in the bodies, but what about the displays? Up front, we have identical 6.9-inch displays featuring LTPO OLED tech and smooth 120Hz refresh rate. In our typical high brightness test, where we simulate direct sunlight at over 100,000 lux, both performed so similarly that you could not tell them apart with the naked eye. That said, the 17 did show a substantial jump in nits during peak brightness compared to the 16 Pro Max. On the security side, we still have Face ID for both, so there are zero differences to report here. Now, feel free to pause the video right now if you want a closer look on screen specs. So both of these displays are absolutely top tier, no doubt about it. Yes, the 17 Pro Max technically takes the lead with its anti-reflective coating and second generation ceramic shield, but the day-to-day difference isn't exactly mind-blowing. At the end of the day, either display is going to handle basically anyone's needs with ease. But how does the 16 Pro Max stack up against the newer 17 when it comes to the audio? We have stereo speakers on both iPhones, with one at the top and the other at the bottom. Apple made the speaker grill way wider on the 17 Pro Max, but does that actually translate to better beats?
I need all the wins, yeah. Ain't no L's, I gotta get a no call and quits, yeah. Gotta keep on moving no matter how hard it gets, yeah. Better move out the way, cause I'm coming with harder hits. My head is as hard as a brick, but I'm harder than all of this.
To be honest, we are not hearing a massive difference between the two. Being picky, the 16 Pro Max sounds a bit louder and hits highs a little better, while the 17 has a tiny bit more punch in the bass. Still, they are incredibly similar. By the way, we know a ton of you still haven't hit that subscribe button, so if this review is putting vital information into your brain, why not join the Versus Club? Also, we drop links in the description if you want to take an even closer look at either one of these iPhones yourself. Now, it's time to see how these cameras perform. For the main shooters, we are looking at identical hardware on both, 48 megapixels with an f1.78 aperture and a 1/1.28 inch sensor. Some brands, like Google, love to recycle the same sensors for years while just tweaking the software processing. But with these two iPhones, there are basically no changes at all. Or at least that is how it looks in outdoor shots. Once you move indoors under artificial light, the 17 Pro Max definitely leans warmer, though that could just be a random one-off. Checking out the ultrawide cameras, it is once again identical everything. 48 megapixel cams with a 120-degree field of view. This time though, you can really spot a difference in white balance between them. Another big deal is that the 17 Pro Max pumps out 24 megapixel photos by default, while the 16 Pro Max only gives you 12 megapixel files. And you can definitely see the difference when you zoom in. Indoors, the colors are more of a match, but the dynamic range on the 17 has clearly leveled up. Just look at how much more detail is in this overhead lamp compared to the 16. Zoom is where actual hardware changes appear. The 17 Pro Max brings a brand new 48 megapixel periscope telephoto with 4x optical zoom, while the 16 has a lower res 12 megapixel periscope telephoto with 5x optical zoom. Here is how they look at their optical levels. And besides the jump in resolution, there aren't any big differences. However, at 10x zoom, you can really see the 17 pull ahead with way better detail than the 16. The 16 maxes out at 25x, and those shots are, well, not exactly great. If you need to go the distance, the 17 takes the lead again with a 40x digital zoom. Now let's talk portrait mode. Just like before, we are seeing basically zero differences between these two when you're snapping portraits with the main camera. However, things get weird when you switch to the telephoto lens. The 17 Pro Max struggled incorrectly blurring my face, while the edge detection on the 16 Pro Max was also just straight up better. Swiping over to video, both of these phones max out at 4K at 120 FPS. And just as a quick heads up, we film all of our test footage at 4K 30 FPS. We're back to square one with both phones delivering identical quality. You are getting lots of detail and super stabilization on both, so there is really nothing new to report here. If you want that cinematic look, both phones stay at 4K resolution, but the frame rate drops down to 30 FPS. Again, no real differences between them. The background blur looks sweet, and the edge detection is snappy enough to keep up with quick moves and different angles. Moving to the ultrawide cameras, you can still hit 4K resolution, but you are capped at 60 FPS instead of the 120 FPS you get on the main sensor. Once again, they are pretty much twins, though we did catch a slightly warmer tone on the 17 Pro Max. Maybe the orange from the phone is leaking its color into the footage. Flipping things 180 degrees, the 17 Pro Max debuts a new 18 megapixel front camera with a square sensor, designed to grab horizontal or vertical shots without you having to rotate the phone. The 16 is still rocking a traditional 12 megapixel camera. It is a bit of a trade-off here. The 17 definitely crams more scenery into the frame, but the 16 actually grabs more detail, so it really depends on what you prefer. In low light, that trend continues. The 16 looks a bit sharper, while the 17 loses some detail and makes my face look a little too flat. For your selfie videos, both phones max out at 4K 60 FPS, regardless of those sensor differences. Once again, you get a slightly wider view of your surroundings with the 17 Pro Max, but that said, the difference is honestly tiny and most people won't even notice it. So now let's test out the audio coming from both of these devices. We'll start off with the 17 Pro Max over here. What do you guys think? How do I sound? There's a few people talking behind me, some cars going around. How's it handling that? And then we've got the 16 Pro Max. Is it worse than the 17 Pro Max or does it sound the same? What do we think? As always, let's talk about it. Audio from the 17 Pro Max sounds a bit strange. We think it's perhaps because of wind hitting the microphones, but at the same time, the 16 Pro Max has no issues with this. All right, let's flip the lights off and see how these two handle the dark. The main cameras are basically twins in low light, pumping out solid quality, though my blue jeans look a bit unnaturally bright on both. Portrait mode gets interesting though. The 17 looks noticeably blurry and has a lot of noise, but surprisingly has better colors and snappier edge detection than the 16. When it comes to ultra-wide shots, the 17 definitely takes the lead. You are getting a much more detailed shot, and funny enough, it actually has less noise this time around. For those telephoto zoom shots, the 17 looks sharper overall, but being fair, the white balance on the 16 is more true to life. Switching to video on the main sensors, we are back to identical results. Honestly, trying to tell these two apart in a blind test would be next to impossible. While the video quality definitely takes a hit on the ultrawide cameras, the 17 stays a bit sharper than the 16, though neither one can touch the quality of the main shooters. As you can see, the 17 does bring some upgrades to the table, mostly with that fancy front camera and the new telephoto lens. However, these feel more like tiny gradual tweaks rather than anything revolutionary. At the end of the day, you can expect pretty much the exact same experience regardless of of which iPhone you pick. As an extra for creators, you get Pro RAW for photos and 4K ProRes for video on both at a blazing 120 FPS. However, the 17 comes with Apple Log 2, while the 16 only has the first generation Apple Log. Also, the 17 features ProRes RAW, which captures all censored data, which gives you the absolute maximum flexibility when editing in post. But now let's see how big the performance difference is. Controlling these pieces of tech, we have the Apple A19 Pro on the 17 Pro Max, while the 16 Pro Max packs the A18 Pro. We also get a RAM bump to 12GB on the 17, up from the 8GB found in the 16. Here is a breakdown of storage options, types, and USB standards, though some of these variants might not be available in every region. These phones are eSIM exclusive in the States and a few other regions, but you can still find versions with a nano SIM slot internationally. The 17 Pro Max also features Apple's new N1 chip for wireless connections, though we have no C1 or C1X chips for cellular. But to really see what these iPhones can do, we threw them into some real-world testing, starting with gaming. We ran 15-minute sessions with a cooldown time in between. First up was Grid Legends in graphics mode. The 17 Pro Max can run this game at up to 40 FPS, while the 16 is capped at 30 FPS. Both hold their maximum FPS just fine, plus both stayed surprisingly similar in temperature. Next, we fired up Withering Waves and cranked every setting to the max. Both phones managed to hit 60 FPS, but the 17 handled the stress a bit better, only dipping down to 56 FPS. The thermal management was also better compared to the 16 Pro Max. Moving away from gaming, we exported 99 photos in Lightroom. The 17 Pro Max flexed its muscles here, finishing the render more than a minute faster than the 16. Then we rendered a minute and a half 4K 30 FPS video in Adobe Premiere. Weirdly enough, the 16 Pro Max actually took the win this time, crossing the finish line in under a minute. But let's check out some benchmarks. Over in Geekbench 6, the single-core scores saw a nice bump, but the multi-core is where the 17 really flexed, nearly touching the 10,000 point mark. In the 3D Mark Wildlife Extreme stress test, the 17 Pro Max naturally scored higher on both its best and worst loops, but more importantly, it showed way better sustained performance. In Antutu, the 17 Pro Max officially smashed through the 2 million point barrier, leaving the 16 a bit behind. So the 17 Pro Max is obviously the king of benchmarks and real-world tasks, but honestly, the iPhone 16 Pro Max is still a total powerhouse. It will run basically any app or game you throw at it, and despite Apple claiming aluminium is better for thermals, we had negligible differences in temperatures. So yes, we have some small differences in performance, but what about software? You certainly know iOS 26 brought this new liquid glass interface. Some people find the legibility a bit sketchy with all those translucent layers, but hey, that's all down to your personal taste. When it comes to features, these two are practically twins. You're getting the stretched lock screen clock, those deeper personalization options, the action button, and the camera control button on both. Plus, you've got the full suite of Apple Intelligence for searching your screenshots, ChatGPT integration, and all that good stuff. Feel free to pause the review for some additional software details. So in the software department, you're basically getting the exact same experience. Of course, that also means you're getting the same bugs that Apple is slowly squashing, plus we are still out here dreaming of a global back gesture. But there are two massive factors left in this showdown: battery life and the big one, pricing. The 17 Pro Max now packs a 5,088 mAh battery in the eSIM-only version, though in the Nano SIM model, the capacity is pretty similar to the 16 Pro Max. We don't have official wired charging speeds, but for wireless charging, both support 25 watts with MagSafe. Both support wired and wireless reverse charging, but the wireless version only works with attached MagSafe power banks, while the phone itself is plugged into a cable. Go figure. In our exhaustive battery drain test, we calibrated both phones to 500 nits and turned all battery-saving features off. We ran a 9-app loop, starting with an hour of Instagram scrolling, assisted by our awesome Versus bot. After that, we hit 30 minutes of 4K video recording, then an hour of web browsing, 1 hour of Google Maps navigation, followed by an hour of Subway Surfers. Next, another hour of YouTube streaming, an hour of music streaming, and an hour of video calling. Finally, another half hour of video recording and one last hour of temple run. The 16 Pro Max said adios at the 10-hour and 12-minute mark, while the 17 Pro Max pushed through for over 3 more hours, eventually tapping out at a massive 13 hours and 39 minutes. Next, we hooked them up to a 100 watts brick. The 17 Pro Max hit a full 100% in 1 hour and 26 minutes, peaking at 35 watts. The 16 Pro Max took its sweet time, finishing in 1 hour and 58 minutes, even though it weirdly peaked slightly higher at 37 watts. But after everything we have looked at, we have to talk about the biggest factor of all, and that's the price. Since the iPhone 17 Pro Max is still the new kid on the block, don't hold your breath for any major discounts. It is currently retailing for $1,199. On the other hand, you can snag the 16 Pro Max for just $929 through Apple's own refurbished store. That is a massive $270 difference, enough cash to buy about 397 actual apples to keep the doctor away for a while. But between us, you can often find even better deals on Amazon, where refurbished units go for as low as $800. So we have reached the finish line, and here are our 2 cents. Honestly, the smarter buy right now is the 16 Pro Max. The performance is more than enough for 95% of you. The cameras perform almost identically and sometimes even better. Plus, you still get titanium instead of just aluminium. But the real highlight is that unbeatable price, especially if you can snag a refurbished or new one for around $800. To put into perspective, that's the price of a base iPhone 17. Of course, if you absolutely need the latest and greatest, or you just want to flex that you can afford it, then go ahead and drop the cash on the 17 Pro Max. Then again, you could always just buy an orange case for the 16 and call it a day. If you want a general overview on how these two stack up against the 15 Pro Max and the 14 Pro Max, check out our comparison right over here. And before you go replace your scrub daddy, don't forget to give us a big thumbs up if you enjoyed this video, and hit subscribe because we're always testing new tech to help you make the best choice. We'll see you in our next video, and until then, take care.